Good evening. My name is Molly Fee, and I'm the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. And I'm delighted to welcome friends and colleagues, old and new, to the Department of State's historic Benjamin Franklin Room. This dinner is intended to be a capstone to today's productive and positive African Business Forum. And we also hope the food is good. Let me share just one thought with you, because I know it's been a long day. There is an overused proverb in Washington policy circles. We talk often of the three-legged stool. The three legs of the stool are security, governance, and development. The stool represents the idea that without one, the others can't work, and they all need equal support. In practice, however, I'm afraid it's fair to say we tend to focus more on security and government crises. Today and tonight are about right-sizing that discussion and putting the stool on stable footing by focusing on the role of development. Of course, development encompasses many elements. The United States is rightly well known for our emergency assistance. We are the largest humanitarian donor in the world, and we are the partner you can count on when you face crises, whether they be in health or most recently in food security. But the concept of development also includes trade and investment, the non-emergency engagement that has the potential to change the continent by empowering and lifting up your people and societies while also benefiting the American people and our shared interests. And then hopefully we won't spend as much time on security and governance. To our African friends and partners, we hear you. We agree that a catalytic jump in U.S. trade and investment in Africa is good for you and good for us. And we all agree that we can and must do better. Tonight, we've asked two distinguished leaders to discuss how we can do better. They're well known to all of you. First, Strive Masiyiwa, who is with us this week as a special advisor to the African Union to work with us on food security. In addition to his exceptional philanthropy, Strive is also an exceptional businessman, so we have asked him to provide an outside perspective. We've also asked my boss, Secretary Antony Blinken, to be the inside voice. Secretary Blinken, you may not know, but he really considers this issue to be so important, and he's consulted widely, and he cares deeply about improving U.S. government performance in this space. You heard him and President Biden today at the Convention Center talk about this theme, and tonight he will underscore our commitment to doing better. Finally, I want to tell you a sort of an inside story about Secretary Blinken. Whenever we meet him and we discuss the challenges we're facing, the first thing he says, and he always says it, and he always means it, is, how can I help? That's what partnership is about, how we can help each other. So let me start by turning to Strive to help us jumpstart our conversation about how to do better in U.S. trade and investment. Thank you.
Good evening, Secretary Blinken. Wonderful to be here, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. As many from Africa know, I have a Facebook platform for young African entrepreneurs. There's about 6 million of them that I give advice to. And they have this concept of an elevator pitch. And I was told today that I must do an elevator pitch. And I thought, my goodness, I've got to take on my own advice now. So what's the tallest building in America? Because I need a bit more space. But I'm also told by my elders in Africa that if one of your elders is speaking after you, be brief and quick. So I'll be brief. But before I proceed and leave the lobby area of this 100-story building, Secretary Blinken, I hope there'll be time for us at the top of the building as well. Let me start by thanking you. I see here my colleague, Dr. Orama, who was with me as the task force for 2 years on the African vaccine and COVID response. And I just want to really echo what Molly said. America was an incredible partner. You know, when the new administration took office, we had started working even earlier, but we quickly set up a task force. We met every single week with a team from the White House. We allocated the vaccine shipments that you were receiving from the United States. They consulted us on every single shipment. And we would sit there and we would go back to them and we say, Nigeria needs another 5 million doses. Can we have them next week? It was go, go, go. Thank you very much, Secretary Blinken and the team. You know, my remarks basically about making a case to persuade the world's largest capital market to invest in Africa. The opportunity in Africa is found in our people, 1.3 billion people, and the extraordinary natural endowment that we have. I like to think in terms of numbers like most young entrepreneurs, and I always say to them, get to the numbers quickly. So here are our numbers. Our GDP is 2.5 trillion. We're just behind India at about 3.1 trillion. But you know, 25 years ago, China's GDP was only 1 trillion, less than half of what Africa's GDP is today. At that time, our GDP was about 390 billion. And India was at 450. So if I were to put a case, we're 2.5 trillion. Pre-pandemic, we were managing growth sometimes average about 5%. It had almost become a cliche to say of the 15 fastest growing economies in the world, 10 are African. So we were growing. And we can grow. Even at 5%, we could be, in the next 25 years, almost 10 trillion. And we will be 2.5 billion people, 25% of the world's population. As an entrepreneur, I'd say, what an opportunity you have. What an opportunity we have. This is the greatest frontier market to come. India is just taking off. They're just off on the runway. We're asking you to step up and help us accelerate and realize this opportunity. The dividend for Africa is realizable only through the collective. This was the lesson of the pandemic. When we as Africa speak for 1.3 billion people, when we as Africa act as 1.3 billion people, then we have a place at the table in the economic stakes. But our opportunities are not inevitable. That is for my African brothers and sisters. But I hope the others didn't hear that. It is not inevitable. There's some very heavy lifting that we have to do on our side. But I didn't come to make a pitch to our side. I came to make a pitch to the world's biggest economy, to the largest pool of investable resources in the world. We want you to see our narrative of the African economy. You're a great partner in the humanitarian world. There is no question of doubt about it, and we are ever grateful for that. But we want you to consider the case of how you could help us to accelerate our market potential. We would like to urge you, Mr. Secretary, and our colleagues from the American private sector to really have another look at us as an economic player. And we would like to urge you to use the convening power of this great nation to get us a better deal, to get us a better deal for patient capital, the kind of capital that can help us build the infrastructure. We cannot grow food which we cannot get to markets. We need rail, we need roads, we need ports. And our people will tell you we need it now. We need patient access to global capital. We can't do it with bonds, Euro bonds. We have to have access to real capital, the kind of investment you did for Germany and Japan at the end of the war. And I can assure you, we will be that partner for you. Africa needs help to develop its human capital. In 25 years, more than half of the world's young people will be Africans. We need to realize that potential. They are not ready with the skills for the 21st century. We need better access to global markets when we do produce things. We need to develop a people-centered investment infrastructure. And we need the support of America's private sector that has been with us, but we now ask you to go to the next level. Finally, we love to be here. We waited for a long time for this summit, but we would like you to consider institutionalizing our meetings. Perhaps we could meet every 2 or 3 years, Mr. Secretary. And perhaps when we meet, we can meet, roll up our sleeves, and consider the progress that we have made in a scorecard matrix, the kind of thing we would do in business, where you will tell us, partner, we think you should do this, and we will say, yes, partner, we think you could do more of this. And we know you're ready for that. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good night.
I'm going to introduce again America's best diplomat, Secretary Blinken.
So I can make this very simple and easy and quick. What he said, thank you. But I feel an obligation to add just a little bit. First of all, welcome. It is wonderful to see so many friends, colleagues here in this room. To those of you who haven't been here before, this is actually, Strive, this is the top floor. And this is the Benjamin Franklin room. Benjamin Franklin's looking down on us this evening. He was, as many of you know, America's very first diplomat. He signed our first treaty, our first alliance with France. He charted the Gulf Stream. He pioneered electricity. He gave us our ethos of self-government. And virtually none of this did he do while sober. So I invite you to be inspired by our first diplomat. A warm welcome to all of our dinner guests, especially, again, my colleagues and counterparts from African nations. It's been one of the great pleasures of my tenure in this job, working with each of you. And I'm so pleased that we're here together this week in Washington to continue that work. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your leadership throughout this summit and everything leading up to it, and the many priorities that have been vital to our partnership. And thank you as well to the business leaders who are here with us tonight. Thank you for bringing your ingenuity, your energy to our shared work. Indeed, there are few issues that we've been talking about these last couple of days that we can solve without the engagement of the business community. And to the Assistant Secretary, Molly, thank you, not just for your dedication, shared by so many here at the State Department, but to the work that you're doing every single day and that our team is doing every single day, not just to make the summit a success, but to strengthen the relationships that are at the foundation of the summit. It really is not easy to follow Strive. Talk about someone who's made a profound difference, a real difference, in thousands and thousands of lives. Scholarships for tens of thousands of orphan children, mobilizing billions of dollars to support African farmers, leading the fight against HIV/AIDS, against Ebola, and more recently, against COVID-19. And now, to my great gratitude, he's turning to the challenge of long-term food security on the continent, a mission that the United States shares and is joining him to advance. The millions of lives that Strive has touched are a testament to the immense potential for good that can be created when the business community and governments actually work together. And that's what tonight is all about. Partnership is at the heart of President Biden's strategy for Africa, partnerships between the United States and African nations, with the private sector, and between our people. And in a sense, it's as simple as this. The challenges and the opportunities of this moment, from climate change to the clean energy transition, public health, economic opportunity, peace and security, these aren't African issues or American issues. They're global priorities. And the best way that we can address them, the best way we can be effective, is together, bringing the full force of our combined collaborative efforts, including the efforts of the business community. I can think of no more compelling demonstration of the power of these partnerships than the successful collaborations between the countries and companies that are here in this room. Take the work of the Kenyan government, which is teaming up with Varian to help millions access life-saving cancer care. Benin and Egypt working with Citi to issue Sustainable Development Goal and green bonds that will help finance clean energy projects directly benefiting their citizens. The small businesses and innovators across the continent who are working with Visa to access financing in global markets. Or take what governments and business are doing together to end the COVID-19 pandemic and better prepare us for future health emergencies. Right now, the public and private sectors are working with the World Health Organization in South Africa to create the first COVID-19 mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub. This ensures that we're not only providing emergency aid to African countries, but we're investing in future tech know-how and production in Africa by Africans with all of the health, science, and economic benefits that this brings. And this really is at the heart of our thinking, and it's at the heart as well of what Strive is doing. Yes, of course, we all have to face and deal with emergency situations. We're acutely aware of that and acutely invested in that. But even more important is making these investments in sustainable capacity in Africa for the long term, so that whether it comes to dealing with climate, whether it comes to dealing with COVID and global health, whether it comes to dealing with food security, that capacity exists for the long term in Africa. That's what this is all about and what we have to be about together. These partnerships are not simply or merely financial deals. They are actual solutions to some of the toughest and most important challenges that we face and that we have to face as a global community. They're also critical for increasing trade and investment between the United States and African nations to the benefit of all of us. And you've heard us talk about this today. You heard President Biden address this in some detail today. To try to accelerate that progress, the administration is taking a number of steps, including advocating for American business, driving U.S. private sector investment to growth industries in Africa, correcting misperceptions about risk, and working with African partners to strengthen the business climate in their countries. I want to thank especially my friend and colleague, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, for her tireless work on this front. She and her team are doing incredible things to make this real. This is where the rubber meets the road, and we're so grateful for the partnership that we have with our colleagues at Commerce and with Secretary Raimondo. Gina, thank you for everything you're doing. Finally, you may have heard me say this before, but I think it always bears repeating. Africa is a major geopolitical force. It's one that has shaped our past, it's shaping our present, and it will shape our future. It's a demographic reality, it's an economic reality, and it's a reality that's reflected in the incredible dynamism and vitality of African nations, of their people, and the companies that do business on the continent. If we work together, if we harness those strengths, I am confident, more than confident, that we really can chart a more prosperous and more secure future for all of our citizens. So there's a lot to be done day in, day out that makes good business sense, but believe me when I say beyond the business sense, there's a higher calling here, one that can make genuine progress for millions and millions of people. It's where convenience and conviction come together. And all of you in this room are a big part of that story, a story I hope we can all tell together. Thank you so much for being here this evening.